Hey, and welcome everyone to the fourth live stream on YouTube. Today we're going to be talking about core fundamentals. Okay, so your core, I think everyone knows what the core is. We're going to be talking about that. Welcome. What else can I say? I'm supposed to have a really clean intro because basically everyone stops listening after 30 seconds and I kind of think I botched it already. So I'll just have to sign on next week and do something better. Now, a little bit of housekeeping. Anyone that would like me to cover a certain topic, let me know. And we can sort of put it into maybe future topics. So I think that'll be helpful for me. And what else do we have to say? Welcome to the live stream. And so, core. Let me preface this. I don't know. So what we're going to discuss today, I have got homework and things I'm supposed to say and do. And I'm just messing it up. Okay, bad intro. Right, so, the core is probably, I don't know, once you get into it or once you I think it's something that you can only really experience with experience. Okay, so looking back or having a longer time working in the realm of core, I think your perspective starts to shift. This is really for people that aren't happy with their core. So you've done core strength, core training, core stability, but you still have back pain. You've done all the things and you're kind of dissatisfied. So hopefully this will help point you in the right direction and get you a sense of ownership of where you want to go, how to approach this sort of topic. There's a lot of, I don't know, misinformation, not much. I think more a sense of putting a lot of faith, trust, and weight behind something that's not necessarily going to actually execute. Does it make sense? So it's almost like a bit of false promise. Slight gaslighting, if you like. And I think also there's a notion of, we'll discuss this, and I want to be gentle about it. Just this notion which we see sort of cropping up enough that it concerns me or enough that it's top of mind for me, I guess, is this notion of just because it works in the short term doesn't mean it's a good long-term strategy or that it's going to work for you later on. Okay, so I think sometimes with core, we can get some pretty good initial gains, but is it duct tape or is it a veneer or is it a gloss over or is this going to serve me over the long term? So that's kind of why it's worthwhile sort of breaking down the core and the fundamentals of what it is and what it isn't. And that's what we're going to try and unpack today. And hopefully, if I just keep showing up and doing these live streams, someone said to me in the last live stream, I was sloppy. I don't want to be sloppy. That's a terrible adjective. So I'm trying to work on my non-sloppiness. And I was a bit sloppy. So there we go. We'll keep improving. I'm going to have a sip of water. This is El Dorado spring water. They don't sponsor me, but maybe they will. I've got to be gentle with my sips. Okay. No one wants to hear people slurping water on camera. So, yeah, that's why you should stay. So I think one of the quickest ways to sort of, I think no one in the history of modern world and modern medicine that had back pain has not been told that core strength is part of that back pain. That's a very, very common assumption and a common narrative. And, what is interesting is that if you're pregnant, okay, and you have a very large distended belly, and you're unable to contract your core, engage your core, you can't even sit up, okay? So you couldn't possibly, you have to sort of turn sideways and side bend up because you can't even do a sit-up. That does not necessarily mean you have back pain. So at this stage, it's safe to say you have zero core function. You don't have to have back pain. And in terms of back pain for pregnancy, a lot of it's got to do with sort of thinking about venous congestion and back pressure and movement. But anyway, so I think that's an important sort of stop to pause and think. There is an article called The Myth of Core, which I read years ago, and that sort of paused me in terms of, I was already noticing that I wasn't that convinced that all back pain was a core issue. And I sort of stopped with excessively trying to stabilize and strengthen people's core in order to sort of resolve back pain. And then I read The Myth of Core, and that's one of the examples they use. And I was like, that is interesting. Yeah. You have no sense of core activation, and you don't have to have back pain. I think, just to put in context, I really was immersed in one stage as people with chronic back pain, failed back surgery, people with back pain that no one else could help, and sort of the end case, chronic back pain. And in helping those people, and many went on to live pain-free for the first time in years or decades, and went on to have active lifestyles. I can honestly tell you, probably at around about 2010, I really stopped thinking about core in terms of the way I think most people think about core. And probably since 2012, I've never ever told anyone, you have a weak core and that's the cause of your back pain. And I have never used core rehabilitation or strengthening as a solution for back pain. Okay, and I have certainly not felt like, I need that tool, or that's a really important key component of back pain and spine rehabilitation is core strength. Okay, so I acknowledge that there's an element of that, and we're going to talk about sort of core safe practices, reframing core, reframing sort of healthy or more fertile soil, as it were, in terms of core. This is not to sort of pull the rug out underneath your feet and then run away. But just, so I don't, in my brain and in my working sort of way of my working toolkit, core strength kind of means little. I don't like the word strength, okay, in terms of core, because your core has many functions. It's a stabilizer, it's accessory breathing muscles, it has relationships, okay? And generally speaking, if you say core strength and you don't have core strength, what else is there? Your core is weak. And as we've, it might be disengaged, it might not have an appropriate relationship, you might have one small part of your core is not sort of working as well in relationship to the others. So core strength sort of is kind of pretty black, white, on, off, and I don't think it's a helpful phrase, really. Okay. So there we go. So I think let's start off with being practical and sort of just get into it. I'm waffling a little bit. So in terms of your core, I think we're going to sort of build up and go through segments and function of certain parts of our core system. One is, again, core. We talk about core and strength. So strength's not that most appropriate word. We could have core connection, core intelligence, core coherence, core function, but of course it was called core strength. So if it's not strong, it must be weak. Okay, not helpful. Okay. The second thing is not really your core, is it? Okay. If I core an apple, is that the outside of the apple or the inside of the apple? If I do a core sample, okay, the core is your central sort of around your spine is actually your core. Your abs and your transverse abdominis and your six-pack, that's not really your core either. So no wonder we're so confused about this topic when we can't even have decent sort of nomenclature. Okay. So there we go. So the most important part, this will play out, and I try and fact check myself. I'm just going to switch an auto. There we go. I kind of check myself after these, and I will put corrections in the show notes because I'm kind of riffing it, and if I get carried away or I put too much emphasis in one area, I'll make corrections in the description, right? But the most important probably part of your core would be your diaphragm and your pelvic floor. Okay, so there's a strong correlation between diaphragm and pelvic floor dysfunction, or if they don't work in synergy together, and back pain. So like an 85% correlation, I think. And that's a really, really good place to start. Okay, so do you have a healthy relationship between your diaphragm and your pelvic floor, which is basically the top and bottom containers of what everyone considers to be their core, right? So they're two domes and they oppose each other. The more horizontal they are, okay, so the more lined up they are, the better. So if you have an anterior pelvic tilt, we can understand that the pelvic floor is probably, okay. We can understand that that pelvic floor is probably not as aligned and holding up your abdominal contents as it could be. Okay, so we kind of want a horizontal pelvic bowl. Okay, so remember your stomach contents are liquid and they go down into the bowl of your pelvis, and having that pretty horizontal and stacked is probably a good idea, because otherwise, if you tilted that bowl forward, where would the water pour out? The front. Now you've stacked up abdominal contents like your liver, your large intestine, your small intestine, your pancreas, your spleen, your stomach, okay, and you tilt it and pour it out the front, your core is going to bulge, let's say. Okay, now you might say, oh, I've got a pot belly, I want to not have a pot belly, and you're going to try and pull in your stomach. Okay, first order thinking, probably you should try and have a pelvic bowl that's underneath you supporting this column of liquid or mostly liquid organs, right? And it needs to oppose the diaphragm sort of vertically too. So some people, you might have a collapsed chest, you might have flared ribs, you might have a head forward posture, you might have a whole bunch of things going on, and your diaphragm alignment's not the best it could be either. So the relationship between these two and the structural relationship of these two is a good place to start. And basically what happens is when your diaphragm contracts, okay, so it pulls air into your lungs and it descends. And in order for it to descend into this space where your organs are incompressible, okay, because you can't compress a liquid, there has to be some sense of give. So what gives? Your stomach needs to, relatively speaking, relax to make space for your diaphragm to come down. So you might think of this in terms of belly breathing or yoga breathing. I belly breathe. So when you breathe in, your belly should expand. Okay, and also your pelvic floor should relax and go down. Okay, and that's the synergy of the diaphragm and the pelvic floor. When the diaphragm contracts, it comes down. When the pelvic floor relaxes, it goes down. So active diaphragm, relaxed pelvic floor. Okay. The opposite, when your diaphragm relaxes, it goes up. When your pelvic floor contracts, it goes up. Okay, so that's the synergy between those two organs. And it's really important to have a sense of synergy between those two organs. When your belly relaxes, okay, and this came up in our running revamp class this morning, it's okay for your lower back to contract slightly. So there's a sense of synergy between the back and the front of your core. When your stomach contracts, it's okay for your back to round or flatten slightly or relax. So here we have this from front to back, a sense of contracting at the back but relaxing in the front, then contracting in the front and relaxing in the back. And from top to bottom, we have the same sort of sense. And that's really sort of key to having a healthy, organic, functional system. When people are told to engage their core, let's say in run or do an activity, and you're bracing your core, there's no sense of give and take or contraction or relaxation. So we call about this sort of very, very stiff canister. It's definitely got a role. So if I was to do, I don't know, if I was going to have a blow to the stomach, I'd want a very stiff and engaged stomach to sort of help the blow. Or if you're lifting very, very heavy objects, at some stage, you're going to want a stiff canister. And I know at this stage, if what I'm saying offends you, or it is how dare you say that, or you don't know, I just want to put it out there. Sort of Stuart McGill, very famous, written many, many books, much research has been done about the stiff spine. We can read about the myth of core. If you want a totally different take, of course, an expert in the field in this area, in this department, would probably be Peter O'Sullivan. Okay, I think it's Peter O'Sullivan. It's certainly O'Sullivan. Okay, and you can start to read about a whole different framing of the sort of core and function. We'll get into what your core should and shouldn't be able to do. But basically you can't walk around with a stiff canister and an engaged core, because it's just static and held, and that's not how things work. So we, with this breath in and breath out, We take about 20,000 breaths a day. There was at one stage with spine and surgery and repair, they wanted to put sort of ceramic discs. So a disc replacement with a ceramic disc and titanium. And when they did studies on these, if I remember correctly, they basically wore out from breathing alone within, I think, a 3 to 5 year period. Okay, so the movement of breath, the 20,000 breaths that you take a day, the quality of those breaths is really integral to the health of your spinal or your spine itself. Discs don't have a natural blood supply. So you can think of them as sponges. They need to contract and relax. We need to sort of squeeze the fluid out and then retract and suck fluid back in order to hydrate and have healthy discs. Your spine hates segmented sections, so relative difference in mobility. So we know if you do a fusion of your lumbar spine, the vertebra above and below will have advanced degeneration pretty rapidly. There's crazy studies where they basically used external fixators on rats and rodents and immobilized spine, and almost immediately you start to see degenerative change above and below. So we know with the spine that it needs to be sort of congruent, it needs to be fluid. We don't want sharp, sudden angles. We don't want sudden relative stiff and relatively hypermobile sections. You know, one part of your spine locks up, the other part immediately moves too much. And one of the ways we keep a fluid spine and a sort of is through fluid breathing or breathing spine or the breath massaging, as it were, up and down your spine. And if you're walking around with a braced, guarded, engaged spine and you constantly have tension and you're protecting your back, you're sort of losing a lot of that dynamicism. Okay. If you're in pain or spasm, your back basically contracts and compresses onto your discs more and they desiccate more. If you have a situation where your back muscles are tight, your core muscles are tight, your deep core muscles are tight, like your psoas are tight, you're basically compressing your spine and you're squeezing the fluid out of your discs and you're not hydrating them and you don't have proper fluid movement in your spine, you are really setting yourself up for a lot of trouble. And at this stage, engaging, bracing, guarding, sort of contracting your core more is really not going to help. Okay. Cool. So regularly with a flow rope, one guy was sort of comment on social media was like, oh my God, people with flow rope, they think it's like God gave them some exercise and you could just do Indian clubs or a sword. I like the flow rope, okay, because one of the reasons I really got into the flow rope is because for many people, it decompresses their spine. So it's very, very common for people that start swinging the flow rope around to regain an inch or more in their height pretty quickly. Okay, and I think that's a decompression of the spine, that space in your spine. That's really, really healthy. And it's not to be said lightly. Okay, you can go to a chiropractor and they'll say, oh, well, we'll decompress your spine and it'll cost you $3,600 and you got to come in and see me 36 times. If you're in that situation, measure your height before and measure your height afterwards, okay? And tell the chiropractor, if my spine does not decompress, I want my money back, okay? Or you can flow rope and just measure yourself before you start flow roping and learn to breathe properly, or learn to have a healthy breath. And you might be surprised that, holy shit, I might decompress my spine about an inch. Okay. Having said that, this show is not possible without our sponsor. So I've been using LVL UP products for as long as I can remember because I created them. So thank you, Lawrence. I trust my family, my friends, and myself with my own products that I make or have made. I don't know, I know it's a bit random, tongue-in-cheek. Okay, so thank you, Lawrence, for making this show possible. There's a link somewhere on how to buy a flow rope for me, and it comes with a how to use a flow rope course, which is pretty simple, but it's just really the basics that can help you teach you the shape and timing of running and the basic patterns that'll help decompress your spine. Okay, so in terms of this whole diaphragm and pelvic floor, what we also have is most people, if you had to generalize, I would say they have too much pelvic floor tone and an inability to contract and relax it. Okay, so you have overtoned pelvic floor. You need to learn to let go your pelvic floor so they can have a full range of motion. It's almost the same with many, many people that have engaged their core and used their stomach muscles as a sense of a shield, or when they run with an engaged core, have the inability to let that core go and take a deep, full breath. Okay, remember, deep, full breath implies that your stomach will relax. And so you need to learn to contract and relax your pelvic floor, and you need to learn to contract and relax your belly. When we take a normal breath in and a normal breath out at rest, what happens is breathing in is active. So as I breathe in, my intercostals will contract and lift my ribs. My diaphragm is a dome. It contracts itself, flattened down. Okay, so breathing in and your belly's kind of relaxing. Your lower back is gently contracting. Okay. Breathing in is basically active, at rest. To breathe out, I just relax. It goes. So breathing out is passive, at rest, okay, when we're breathing easily. During exertion, the rules change because now we can breathe out further and expiration starts to become active. Now, a while ago, and I was trying to research this and get back to the bottom of it because I really don't trust my memory and recollection of these events anymore. I just keep getting myself fact-checked. But there was a notion of, there was a correlation between transverse abdominis activation and low back pain, and it took off like a meme, like a viral thing that everyone liked. It was actionable. You could test people, and therapists felt empowered and with their knowledge. And basically that if you activated your transverse abdominis, you were doing a really good thing if you had back pain, okay? Because people with back pain often had an inability to engage their transverse abdominis. And that was done with the ultrasound. So kind of like the same thing that you scan babies with. I think the safe way to activate your transverse abdominis, so a lot of people we taught to pull their belly button in towards their spine to activate their transverse abdominis. But remember, what you're doing with that, you basically... your belly has to relax when you breathe in. So basically, by pulling your belly button in, you're restricting your ability to breathe in fully. Okay, and if you hold it there, you're sort of affecting the rate of the breath. Now, what happens when your belly button goes in? Your diaphragm gets pushed up more. What we really, really don't want is a sense of ribs up, diaphragm up. Okay, so if I pull my belly button in, you can do this now, so draw your belly button towards the back of your spine, okay? You might feel like socially and culturally, people don't want pot bellies, or it's not cool anymore. It used to be very sexy to have a pot belly. It's not at the moment, it's not in vogue. So you might be engaging your core so that your stomach looks good, which is a vanity issue, right? But when you pull your belly button in, your ribs will lift. And what's happened to my diaphragm? My diaphragm's gone up. So now I've got up diaphragm, up ribs. If I take a deep breath from there, my breath is restricted, but also that sense of sort of diaphragm up, ribs up is almost the state of fright. So if I had to have a gasp, like, my shoulders will jump up. So it's very common for someone to have that engages their core or pull their belly button into their spine to have a sense of restricted breathing. The breathing goes up into your shoulders. Your shoulders can be higher, and that alone can sort of be, let's say, I can't say put you into a sympathetic state or fight or flight, but it is more sympathetic than if you relaxed and breathe out. Okay, so if we want to sort of get to our parasympathetic nervous system, we exhale and we extend the exhale. Being stuck in the top of your breath with this pattern of diaphragm up, ribs up, which is inefficient way of breathing, tends to make you more sympathetic or stuck in a fright or sense of anxiety or sense of, okay, so on a spectrum, right? And you're not allowed to call it paradoxical breathing. We used to call it paradoxical breathing because now that's a medical term for sort of flail chest and trauma, but it's not healthy breathing. It's not a healthy breathing pattern. I can't remember. I might have it in my notes of what I'm supposed to call it. You can't use paradoxical because that's when you're in hospital with broken ribs. So anyway, it's just a dysfunctional breathing pattern that you're stuck in. And that is strongly correlated to back pain. So by activating your transverse abdominis, you might actually then put yourself into a breathing pattern that has a really, really 85%, I think is the number, correlation with back pain. Yeah, so you can see like, oh shit, this might not serve me, or it might serve me in the short term, but it might not serve me in the long term. Okay. So how do we safely engage our transverse abdominis and pelvic floor and breathe properly and sort of get to a state of, okay, this is all okay, and we get the good stuff? The way I approach it is, so we got this normal breath in, which is active. Okay, our belly expands first, so your belly should get bigger and your ribs come out. A normal breath out is passive, and we breathe out. If I continue to breathe out, my ribs will come down. I continue to breathe out. At some stage, you're going to have a sense of core activation. Okay, and just keep breathing out if you can. Most people can't, especially if you've been stuck with an in belly button. Most people aren't that good at exhaling and exhaling fully, which is also a problem. So you keep breathing out, and at some point you'll find, oh, now my transverse abdominis engages pretty strongly. So a way of thinking of this is your transverse abdominis is at the bottom of your breath on an exhale. I strongly recommend that people include pelvic contraction with that exhale. Okay, so your pelvic floor, if we had to do a Kegel, which is a famous exercise, so you tighten your pelvic floor as if you're stopping urine and a poop sort of mid-go. You want to exhale and then tighten your pelvic floor and hold that for a little bit and then let go your pelvic floor and breathe into your belly. You want to practice that a lot. Okay, so breathing out until you have a sense of your core engages, engage your pelvic floor, hold that for a little bit, let go and breathe in. And your belly needs to relax as you breathe in. For people that have sort of overactive core, overengaged core, up diaphragm, up ribs, generally speaking, we're not that great at breathing out. If you've had dysfunctional pelvic floor, if you fell on your tailbone and you injured it and had pain there, maybe post-pregnancy, if you're suffering, and incontinence and running is a really big thing, and you don't have to have been pregnant to suffer from that, and you want healthy pelvic floor function, it's quite a lot of work. When I think people's symptoms tend to disappear, okay, in this space is when, let's go back to our normal breath in. So we take a normal breath in, normal breath out, okay, and then I start breathing out, okay. If almost immediately as you start breathing out, you have a sense of core engagement and pelvic floor, you can actually feel your pelvic floor shift. That's typically when people's pelvic floor symptoms start to disappear. For most people with sort of less than ideal breathing, okay, and a dysfunctional tonic pelvic floor that they can't either contract or let go, so it's kind of hypertonic all the time. And remember, if your diaphragm's up and your pelvic floor's up all the time, it's going to be toned. We need to be able to fully contract a muscle, fully let go a muscle, and at rest it should have appropriate tone. And again, you can get locked in this pattern of up diaphragm, up toned pelvic floor constantly, and you're never really breathing down and contracting and relaxing or letting that pelvic floor let go, and it can't do its job. So in that pattern, typically we take a normal breath in, normal breath out. That breath is kind of stuck at the top of our breathing. We're not where we should be. Okay, so if we say the top of your breath is a 10, so I breathe in as much as I can, that's a 10. I breathe out as much as I can, that's a 1. Okay, your normal breath in, normal breath out at resting, you should be at about a 4 or a 5. Now, most people that are stuck with a tight core, tight pelvic tone, sort of not ideal breathing, can't even breathe out to a 1. Okay. And generally speaking, they have to breathe out to about a 1 before they really start to feel some sense of core engagement and pelvic floor engagement. Or it's like that sort of engagement's right down at the bottom of your breath. And like I say, I think in healthy breathing, it seems to me that we breathe in, normal breath in is passive, normal breath out, normal breath in is active, normal breath out is passive. Okay, I breathe a little bit out past that, and suddenly I have a sense of core and pelvic floor engagement. That seems to be when people have healthy cores and healthy breathing. And generally speaking, a whole lot of your problems will start falling away at this point in time. Okay, so that's kind of where you want to get at too, and you want to sort of practice breathing and getting your pelvic floor along for the ride, because for most people, your pelvic floor contraction is way far away from being incorporated in normal healthy breathing. Does it make sense? So if I have normal passive breathing, your pelvic floor tone should be changing. You might just not be able to feel it. Yeah. So If you're running or doing walking, you can kind of breathe out until you feel a sense of core engagement. Pause a little bit and then breathe in. Remember, relax your belly to breathe in, relax your pelvic floor when you breathe in, and you can just practice that. And then you're really taking your breathing, your pelvic floor, your core stability, the synergy between your back and your core, your stomach, the synergy between your pelvic floor and your diaphragm, and you're starting to incorporate it into movement and into life. And that's the point. And that would be, for me, by an order of absolute monstrous magnitude, more important than any core strength, stability, dead bugs, whatever, bird dogs, bracing, pile of presses, planks, whatever you can do. Like, if you can't do that, I don't believe you have anything. And if you can do that, many of your problems and so-called sort of issues will fall away, and you might even solve some problems that you didn't think were related to your core and pelvic floor. Okay, so that would be first order. And if you haven't got that, I don't really care what else you've been doing and what else you think is important. It's just all a compensation or workaround. Okay, so even if it's a successful workaround, it is a workaround, and at some stage, I'm afraid, the rent check does come due. It'll stop working for you at some stage. Okay, right. How are we doing here? Let's check in on our live, because this is live, and so we can have questions. We have, hello everyone. Okay, my neighbor suddenly started dragging his right leg while running. She saw doctors, MRI and acupuncture, haven't revealed the cause. Any idea what might be causing a leg to drag while running? So that's heartbreaking. I'm sorry to hear that for your neighbor. We encounter that every now and again. There's certain like dystonias and dysautonomias, which are sometimes your nervous system just glitches or gets burnt out, and it doesn't want to do what it habitually did. So it could be something along those lines. She's going to have to go for medical testing and figuring it out. This could be really bad news, I'm afraid. So you've got to take it very seriously. It could be sort of the first heads up of a sort of a muscle wasting or metabolic disease, or so she's got to go and have a look, and she's just got to see. So the first, where she is now, and I mean, like, this is not medical advice, but probably she needs to be seeing a neurologist and doing nerve signal testing, and you need someone that's smart to case manage this to guide you through it. Okay, so it might be just a pinched nerve, but it might be the tip of something more. Okay, I'm sorry to hear that. Seneca Creek, I've consistently had a 52 to 48% distribution in the right versus leg length. Soon after using flow rope a short time every day, it's basically 50-50. Yay! Well, there we go. This show was proudly brought to you by a flow rope. Yeah, see, we have a nice red one. Comes in a cool cotton bag. Dum, dum, dum. Thanks for the plug. I appreciate it. Nice work. Yeah, the flow rope it's pretty cool what it does, sort of doesn't do. Robson says hello again. Hello. Okay, so here we are. We're talking about the core, how to engage it. Probably what I think is the most important part of core. I mean, if you can't walk with a functional core, and if you can't breathe properly when you're walking and running, like, what have you actually got? If your pelvic floor is constantly toned, it's very, very difficult to have a healthy pelvis and healthy hip function. And it's likely that your pelvic bowl is in the wrong sort of shape or aspect. And now you've got back pain, or you've got a sharp angulation at the bottom of your spine. And then you're hypermobile and you're moving too much there. And then you think you've got a weak core, and then you're trying to bridge and plank and stabilize it. And it's just like, it's all of this whole cascade. And often, the really, really upstream is make sure you can breathe, as I just described, healthily, functionally, and it's there for you when you need it. Okay, otherwise, like, you don't really have the basics. It's like, I don't know, you didn't learn how to read or write at school, and now you want to go to college. Okay, so I think the muscles of the pelvic floor, the muscles of your core, the next one is six-pack. Six-pack looks good, so people like six-pack. I think the important part of a six-pack is that it helps hold the front of your pelvis up. So many people sort of will say, I have a anterior pelvic tilt. Well, one of the key muscles that helps not let you have an anterior pelvic tilt is your six pack. So it basically holds your pubic bone up at the insertion on the pubic bone. So that's kind of the lower part of your six pack's job. At the top of your six pack, it's often involved in rib flare. So if you gained a lot of weight and you had sort of like a big stomach, or possibly in pregnancy, you can spread out your rectus abdominis and it sort of flattens and widens. It can be associated with rib flare, and often during pregnancy, sort of your ribs are sort of pushed up and away. Okay, and you don't have to have pregnancy to have this condition or this sort of description of state. And you might have an anterior tilt. So kind of your ribs start running away from your pelvis and you don't have a connection. Now, again, you're going to think, oh, I have a weak core. No, your core's just not connected. It's not talking to each other. The ribs don't have a sense of synergy with your hips. Okay? So we do like to consolidate that. And again, as you exhale, your ribs come down and you keep breathing and breathing and breathing, and gently your pelvis should roll back, okay, as you keep exhaling, because remember, your back's relaxing as your stomach contracts. And at some stage, it might be right at the bottom of your breath, like, I will breathe out as much as I can. I can't breathe. No, you can breathe out a little bit more. Go for it. Oh, wow, shit. Hey, my core engaged and I can feel my hips are connected to my ribs. Hold that for a little bit and then relax. And what do we do first? We let go of pelvic floor and we let go of belly, and we allow our belly to expand first when we breathe in. And if you keep practicing finding that relationship, after a while, it's not right down there at the bottom of your breath. It starts to become normal breath in, normal breath out. As I breathe out, shit, my ribs connect to my hips. Healthy core, yes. Yeah. So that's kind of what you want to do. Post-pregnancy, you've got to do a lot of that kind of work, okay? And it doesn't mean sort of then walking around with an engaged core. You've got to let that core go. It needs healthy range. It needs to be able to fully contract and fully relax and have normal tone at rest. That is one of the definitions of a healthy muscle, okay? If you, in that case, I like doing pikes. So pike would be putting the tops of your feet or your shins on a Swiss ball in a push-up position, and then you just let your hip falls back. So diving is a pike. Pikes are great for lower stomach tone and for learning sort of that your lower stomach or your lower six-pack can hold your pubic bone up, okay? Another great way to sort of get a neutral pelvis and decompensate your pelvis and start having a better pelvis aspect is also gently, please, and not with too heavy a ball on head exercise, which I have a video for. It creates structure in your upper cervical region, and it really helps you sort of find a neutral pelvis. And then I've got a whole lot of resources and YouTube videos on sort of hip dissociations and trying to have a healthy pelvic function and pelvic. So you want to kind of do that. And again, you know, as you have more synergy in your stomach and more sense of connection, and things tend to go better. So at this stage, I don't think I'm going to use the word strengthening your lower stomach. Okay, so imagine now, again, you had for a period of time an anterior pelvic tilt, or you were pregnant for a time, or your ribs flared, or you're in that state at the moment. Your core is probably not, I don't think it's healthy to say it's not strong. I'd say it's not consolidated. So you kind of need to feed into your core and create relationships and consolidate, like sort of push things together, okay? And just keep tagging that so that your nervous system says, oh, I actually have a relationship. And then you have a muscle that has a sense of connection, rather than, you know, someone would strengthen a muscle that's not really connected, okay? Which is very, very common at this stage, because you know, like, this doesn't feel right. I want a six-pack. I don't have a six-pack. My stomach doesn't feel strong, blah, blah, blah. And so you start planking. Okay. If you are going to plank, because planking really does sort of give your six-pack quite a strong stimulus. Okay, I like two variants. I like either pushing your heels into a wall, so sort of back up to a wall so that your feet are just away from a wall, and then drop into your heels and press your heels into the wall. It really does help reduce sort of a sense of shearing in your lower back and consolidates your lower back, okay? Or if you don't have a wall nearby, really drop into your heels. Okay, so don't be sort of forward on your toes. drop down deeply into your heels or push your heels off a wall. So you're actually pushing almost backward into the wall. That will kind of stabilize your lower back. Or my favorite one is to, especially if you're a swimmer, is to plank on the tops of your feet. So straighten your feet, gently internally rotate your femurs, and do a plank on top of your femurs. You'll find a significant increase in sort of tone and load in your lower stomach region, and you'll probably experience a significant reduction of any sense of shearing or dumping into your back or lower back stress. Okay, so that is my favorite way of doing. Your calves might cramp and your feet might cramp, but hell, your core is going to feel great, and so is your lower back. Okay, and it's also the position that we pike out of is with relaxed front of your ankles and slightly pointy toes and slightly internally rotated femurs. Right, so that's the six-pack, kind of taken care of. Oh, six-pack also, if you do pull-ups, really good six-pack exercise, because your six-pack kind of links your finger. If I was a chimpanzee or a human swinging a tree, your six-pack is kind of related to your forearm and your finger flexors through your biceps, through your pecs. Okay, so they call them whatever, myofascial train, a myofascial link. And you can often find quite a strong sense of activation of your six-pack by doing a pull-up or hanging or monkey bar swinging. Okay, so there's this notion of hands to pelvis. Like often, I can't really describe all these exercises here. Let's just get the meat and potatoes or the tofu and rice or whatever your main meal, subsistence meal is, down pat, and you can explore later. Okay. So I think, there we go. Okay. Other important muscles are your obliques. So if you had to do a side crunchy, those muscles, they are strongly stimulated through running. If you have healthy running, you'll typically develop good obliques. Okay. I like and really encourage people to learn crawling patterns. That's a really good way of learning the healthy, safe, quiet lower back side crunching that will stimulate your obliques to contract and relax and work with your QLs. So your QLs, your quadratus lumborum in the back, it's one of the muscles that should let go a little bit when you're breathing into your belly. But also the QLs is a massive synergist with your glute medius. So if you've got hip drop or hip stability issues, the QL really does help lift the side of the hip that's dropped gently. And when you're running, your QLs are very, very animated. So they're basically contracting and relaxing on either side as you go along, which again, if you want to view a stiff spine or you stabilize or you engage in your core when you run, you lose that elegant sense of dynamicism of an articulate, intelligent, dynamic, active core. Which I just can't even see why you would even think that way, okay, or why you try and do that way. So where were we now? Okay, QL's gently supporting your glute medius. If your QL's tight and locked on the same side, you might find that it sort of side crunches you and locks you into a shoulder closer to your hip, or sometimes you call it an upslip. It's really difficult for your glute medius to function properly, or your hip stabilizes it all. So again, this notion of we can't be deeply held, we can't be spasmed, we can't be hypertonic. We have to have a sense of range and at rest to have any sense of hope that our muscles will be articulate when we're working. So how do we strengthen obliques? Again, I strongly encourage people. So your lower back, just so everyone's clear, doesn't rotate, okay, or it was not designed to rotate. So the angle of the facets, the big joints at the back of your spine, they oppose each other like a door. So when you think you're rotating your lower back, or let's say you twist your lower back to give it a good stretch, okay, you're basically shutting the door and the two facets oppose each other. Your lower back is designed to flex and extend, so bend forward to touch your toes and lean backwards, and it's designed to side bend. Okay? It is not designed to rotate. So if you see someone running and their upper body is rotating against their lower body and their lower back's got a sense of rotation, that's really dysfunctional. And you will hurt your back or your hips or your knees or all of the above. And there's no amount of core strength and stability that will fix that. Okay, you can suppress it for a while, okay? But again, that's not going to serve you in the long term. And you will think, I have a weak core because look, my lower back's moving on my hips. That's, for me, a timing and a shape issue. Okay, so crawling patterns, you learn shoulder to hip synergy, you learn relationship between your torso and your upper body, your lower back becomes quiet, you learn to safely side bend. If you breathe properly, you learn safe flexion and extension, this gentle rounding and arching of your spine through breath and movement. With the flow rope or different tools, you can sort of start to take these along with on your running journey, and suddenly your back quietens down. You have a sense of connection between your upper body and your lower body. It's far more important than having sort of dysfunction that core strength can't possibly solve. Okay, and that's how we regenerate spines. And that's one of the reasons if you use a flow rope and your spine does decompress, you probably figured that out. Okay, because that constant twisting will tighten the muscles and you will compress your spine. And you just don't go down that road. It's fruitless. Okay, so that's obliques. I wouldn't worry about side planks and side crunches until I understand shoulder to hip synergy and a sense of a quiet lower back when you run. How do we know your lower back's quiet when you run? Just put your hand on it. Okay, or put your one hand on your chest and your one hand on your belly, and the two should move in synchronicity with each other, not sort of in a sense of opposition or apposition. Okay, next muscle. So we discussed transverse abdominis, we've discussed the six-pack, we've discussed the obliques, which are the key sort of ones. Cosmetically, if you want your stomach to look cool, what do they say? Stomach's made in the kitchen. Okay, you need to have low enough body fat that you can see the muscles. It's kind of a big deal. Okay. Then also, like I say, breathe out, find the tone, find that sense of connection, because then you've got the structure and function for to have a aesthetically pleasing stomach. It's amazing if you have a functional core that, as we've described, and you sort of come along, how much better your core can start looking and how quickly it can switch on without doing a lot of core work. So famously, or not famously, I worked with Greg Minnar, the downhill mountain bike rider, and we connected his ribs to his pelvis, and suddenly when he was riding downhill, like his core could engage because there was a sense of connection and synergy. He basically grew a six-pack in one day. He was very pleased with himself. He's never had a six-pack. Did a lot of core planks, sort of planking, bracing, couldn't get a six-pack. And in one day, when his ribs connected to his six-pack magically appeared. He started using his core so much, not thinking about his core, not trying to engage his core, just connected and was there from his riding, that his stomach was so stiff and sore, we had to give him anti-inflammatories and he had to cut his practice runs short because basically he was overusing his stomach. Or it wasn't used to that kind of workload. So again, this notion of if you have a functional core and it's coming along with for the ride, you will start using it. It'll just work naturally. And, like this notion in running, right? When my wife got to college in America, they had a weigh-in publicly. And she knew she wasn't in shape. So listen to what did I just say? She wasn't in shape. She wasn't training. She wasn't training regularly. She wasn't running a normal, regular mileage. So she wasn't in shape, which could also be defined as you carrying a little bit extra weight. Okay. But in her mind, she knew she wasn't in shape because she hadn't done the work, right? It was the first time it ever entered her mind that you could diet and lose weight and improve your running. Because generally speaking, if you slept well and you ate well and you trained a lot, the weight fell off and you were in shape. Okay, that's appropriate for the function. Form follows function, function follows form. Rugby players look one way, NFL players look like this, elite marathon runners look like that. Because if you keep doing the work, you will look like an elite marathon runner, right? And she basically developed an eating disorder. And then she realized, like, oh shit, this is not serving me, thank God, because she was too light and weak and she hadn't done the work. So it works in the short term, but it's not a long-term viable solution. Okay. So it's kind of like the same story with your core. First, get it functional. And if you do the right work, it'll look the right way. And yes, you can tweak and enhance it, but most people don't have a sense of connection, don't have a sense of core function, want that. So just train the living shit out of something that's not working and kind of get yourself into trouble because you might think, okay, well, I'm going to eat less. You start making bad life choices at this stage. So really, please, try and have a functional core, which implies a breathing core, which implies healthy relationships between your pelvic floor and your diaphragm, which implies healthy relationships between your ribs and your hips, which implies that you can have a stable, connected low back in running and walking before you start trying to sort of strengthen this core. And then from that point, like it's just a normal muscle. They're not special muscles. What I mean by that is, they respond to hypertrophy like any other muscle group. Train them sort of not every day, every second day or every third day, 3 sets of 15 with a heavy load, and they will respond. You don't have to do 100 sit-ups a day. You have to do 3 sets of 12 to 15. Okay. The rub is, the hard part is how to do that safely without sort of really stressing your lower back and sort of cheating. Because if you have a dysfunctional core, trust me, you're not going to use your core as much as you think. You're going to recruit and sort of use other muscles like your hip flexors to do the work, and then that's going to load your back, and then you're going down a rabbit hole you don't really want to go down. So first, have a functional core, understand it, feel it, and you might be pleasantly surprised with what your core looks like. And then you can start, while preserving that healthy function, you can start sort of strengthening it up and recruiting it towards specific demands. Again, flow rope, you can get a heavier flow rope, start breathing out and sort of flow rope at the bottom of your breath. It really is a significant core workout. I think another part to mention here is when we load our body. So let's say you do a squat, like a back squat. Okay, you get a significant amount of core stability and stimulus into your core. I prefer doing hex bar lifts, which is pretty vertical. So if that weight goes up, it is a very, very strong core stimulus. Now, at this stage, we're going to introduce us to blow before you go. So blow before you go is, what's her name? PT Julie, someone coined the phrase. So blow before you go would be a normal breath in, okay? And when you breathe in, you relax your pelvic floor. And you need to feel your pelvic floor relax. Okay, so I'm going to take a breath in and relax my pelvic floor. Yeah, it didn't really relax. So I'm going to, I've breathed in, I relaxed my pelvic floor, didn't really feel it relax. I'm going to breathe out. Okay, so normal breath out. Then I'm going to keep breathing out, and I'm going to find, oh, there's my stomach engagement, and I'm going to actively contract my pelvic floor. I'm going to hold it, 1, 2, 3, 4, and I'm going to breathe in and let go my pelvic floor. Now I have a sense of let go pelvic floor. So from there, if I was to lift, I would now exhale till I have a sense of core engagement and pelvic floor engagement or tone, and then I would keep exhaling as I go down for my squat. And you're basically descending down into pelvic floor tone. Now, I sort of didn't cover this earlier. Your pelvic floor, your transverse abdominis, and a lot of your glute stabilizers co-contract together. So you're basically switching on your transverse abdominis, which is primarily one of your stabilizers of your spine, switching on your glute stabilizers and your pelvic floor as you go down, as you exhale. They all come online for you. Okay, and then as you come up, you breathe in, let go, relax your belly, and you stand up straight. So that's called blow before you go. If you have any sense of pelvic floor incontinence, hemorrhoids, inguinal hernias, lower region sort of surgery, even for running, I think if you exhale as you squat down, most people's squat form improves dramatically because your spine is not splintered. And if your spine's splintered and it's not being fluid, you're going to over recruit, or you're going to butt wink or something, because somewhere you've got to create the movement to squat down, and you don't have a fluid spine, you have a stiff spine canister. It's absolutely extraordinary. We had an elite runner who swapped his sort of breathing in, bracing, and going down with a sort of strong canister squatting or hex bar lifting to blow before you go, and it just totally reframed his whole relationship to the marathon. He took about nearly 2 minutes off at the elite level, but also his running became fluid, softer, his injury rates decreased, inflammation in his body decreased. It totally reframed his relationship with running just because he blow before he go. Now, if you're lifting very heavy, like let's say your body weight or up, please don't just start this on Monday or straight after this podcast. Okay, learn blow before you go with no weights. Learn blow before you go with light weights. Learn blow before you go when you're doing mobility. Learn blow before you go when you're doing sort of gentle RDLs or whatever rehab is you prefer to do, and get very, very confident in that. And also remember, how do we sort of define almost a functional healthy core is normal breath in, normal breath out. As I start to breathe out, I have a sense of pelvic floor tone and abdominal tone. You need that. because then you sort of have tone before you even start to blow before you go. Okay, if your pelvic floor tone is right at the bottom of your breath, again, you have to breathe out, okay, shit, now I can feel my core connecting. That's not safe to lift heavy, okay, because you don't have a sense of engagement or stability for a large part of your descending squat. So you've got to get comfortable and competent in that space. You can just Google blow before you go. They explain it very, very clearly. And I strongly urge you to, most of your lifting should be blow before you go. If you lift heavy, listen to your strength coach or do whatever makes you feel the most safe and secure. But anything from a moderate weight or less, I strongly encourage you to figure out blow before you go. It's life-changing. Yeah, so there we are. Now we've got a blow before you go. And okay, so I've sort of got some notes on why core stability was oversold. Okay, basically 2009, a researcher called Eyal Liederman wrote The Myth of Core Stability. I read that. I liked that a lot. It definitely gave me pause for thought. And because of that pause for thought, it reframed things in my mind. And I think it made me a much healthier, safer, better practitioner. It was published in the Journal of Bodywork and Movement Therapies. I'm not saying the whole thing is gospel. I'm just saying read it with an open mind, and it might help you shift your perspective or be less sort of dogmatic or locked into a certain mode, okay? But it goes back to sort of studies. And again, I think there's quite a few sort of notions in this area. And absolutely, like there is a notion that we sometimes need a stiff spine and we sometimes need a stiff canister. I get it. But that's, not for 99% of our daily lives and function, and certainly not something that I think that's going to serve us when we run. The other one is blow before you go. Healthy breathing profoundly changes many people's blood lactate curves and makes you more efficient when you're running. And again, it has a sense of reduced impact because your spine is now fluid and breathing, and it can handle vertical compression. You've got a lot of discs in your spine, and once they stack properly and they're hydrated, it adds to the ability of your body to be a shock absorber and an energy return system like a spring. Okay, so you can try this. You can take a very, very, very deep breath in and sort of lock your core and then do jump rope and realize like, oh shit, I don't feel, you might feel rigid, but you might not be that springy. Okay, and then you can sort of practice normal breathing in, breathing out, stack your spine, and find that sort of sense of blow before you go engagement. And you might find, oh, I have more rhythm and fluidity and a sense of give and take and spring when I'm doing sort of jump rope. And probably that's what you will experience when you start running. Okay. And then, so yeah, we're kind of talking about lifting. So the other one is overhead. If it's safe for you to do so, if you still have shoulders that can do so, so you can get a weight over your head and kind of lock it out. I think at this point, to get a weight over your head, you need to be able to press it overhead 5 times. Okay, so you can't just go and put a really big weight over your head that you can barely get above your head. You need to be able to press it over your head 5 times before you ever consider doing a Turkish get-up or overhead presses. I really like suitcase carry with functional dynamic hips. So basically, as I'm stepping, I'm sort of pressing the earth away with the stepping leg. My belly button is going towards the lead leg. So like an exaggerated sense of synergy, not a suitcase carry that's so heavy that I've locked out my core, contracted, and sort of keep my spine dead still and then move around on my spine. So not that heavier weight that I can't have a sort of sense of belly button to lead leg, belly button to lead leg. Okay. And then the same thing with overhead press. So overhead carry. So get 2 weights over your head, and you're kind of walking along as a happy hip hack. And that vertical loading is a very, very strong core stimulus. The back, the sides, the front, the breathing. Generally speaking, I'm going to tell you that you should probably overhead carry, okay, with a weight that you probably press over your head about 10 times, not just 5 times, okay? And also, you're going to want to sort of exhale until you feel a sense of core engagement, the pelvic floor engagement, and the sort of glute tone, and then stay in that space while you overhead carrying and while you suitcase carrying. So you're doing it pretty exhaled in the beginning, and after a while that range should come up. And so we would want, after a while, you can sort of breathe in and still have that sense of tone and engagement because your core's under load and you're standing up very straight. You don't have to take very big steps. And that's a great way of making this sort of functional breathing core able to handle vertical loads and getting really comfortable in the space of sort of creating a kind of protective shield. And again, remember, these you can often get, if you had to put like an EMG on your muscles, this is when your core really starts lighting up, and it's a strong core exercise, and it's very, very functional, very useful. So I would really try and think about those aspects of core strengthening. The other core strengthening I love is medicine ball passes. So you can sort of stand with the medicine ball, soften your knees, and then sort of pass it to a wall behind you. It bounces off the wall, you catch it again. You can't really do that in America. Your ball will go straight through the wall. Or you can pass it to someone behind you. I think that that oblique rotation really, really helps with rib mobility, with the ability to rotate. After a while, you can sort of really get a sense of my hips are the source of my power and rotation, and sort of practicing ball slam. So you slam the ball down onto the ground. You can throw the ball up. You can do chop patterns with the medicine ball around you, just for a sense of dynamic, big range of motion. I like throwing a ball against a wall and bouncing it back because it has a sense of consequence and timing. So instead of just like getting after some exercise with no real sense of consequence to your actions, you throw, it bounces off the wall, you have to catch it. There's a sense of agility or athleticism. So let's say that's playing around in that space is a cool way of making your core sort of athletic, dynamic, and related to some sense of athletic excellence, not just sort of, I can plank and lock my core, and now that shut down my transverse movement and I run like badly. Okay. Cool. So I think that's a lot. I mean, that's an hour. Hopefully this helps you. We'll do a PDF on this to attach to the description. I will fact check myself and make corrections. If you notice obvious mistakes, just please give me a heads up and we'll try and sort it out. Yeah, and I think that's probably most of what we need to sort out with the core. Yeah, so let's see if we've got any questions. Hello, everyone. Welcome for joining. I know I kind of just waffle on while you guys are questioning me. What do you think about the lower part of the core? I have worked on it with my physio, and for me, it was a good thing for running, especially uphill. Yeah, definitely. Your lower core, which is kind of your transverse abdominis and your obliques and the lower part of your six-pack, is vital for running. And we sort of did discuss that. And yes, it's worthwhile working on. But again, I would say breathe out, exhale, find that lower sense of stomach engagement. Generally, when you're breathing out and your pelvis rolls back a little bit, you start to get that sense of engagement. I love pikes for this because you almost learn to use that part to help stabilize the front of your pelvis. You really do want a sense of dynamicism in your hips and pelvis to safely have a healthy core. And then, yeah, it's really, really important, and it makes a huge difference. Okay, and it really offloads your hamstrings. But having sort of concurrently to that, if you sort of, I don't know, do a lot of B-skips, have really tight hamstrings and adductors, you might find it's really difficult to find the front or your lower stomach because it sort of tilts your lower stomach away from your core. Does it make sense? Okay. Carl Julian, thanks for all of your videos, Lawrence. They've been helping me getting my running back. Oh, I'm so glad. Nice. Yay. We want to move well. We want to move well forever. I was kind of being a bit, what do you call it? I didn't say the right word, is facetious. I was being a bit, whatever, tongue-in-cheek is being kind to myself. And I said, like, imagine walking through Africa, or we've got a bear that's really badly behaved here. Like, people are waking up and finding him sort of munching frozen peas and apples and avocados in their living room. And he's going in and out of all the doors. He trashed my 2 sheds at my bottom property. This has become a real nuisance, right? But imagine encountering that bear and saying, yeah, dude, you didn't do any core and you don't know the secret of the stiff canister and the stiff spine, and you don't know the vagaries of sort of anti-rotation. So like, you're basically ineffective. You're not going to take me down or whatever. See a lion in Africa and say, dude, you don't even know anything about core strength. We I don't know. I know it's like kind of dumb, but it's also like, oh shit, do our primitive ancestors that ran persistent hunted animals down for a living, did they run and say, oh shit, I better stop my rib flare and get my ribs down and engage my core and, keep my shoulders still and my pelvis rolled back because I have an anterior pelvic tilt and, my shoulders are lifting near my ears because I'm breathing badly, so I better fucking hold them down too. There's a whole description of what's like compressed running. So you engage your core. Okay, so your shoulders go up and your breath projects up into your shoulders because you need to breathe to run. And then people say, oh shit, your shoulders are high, so you need to hold them down. And then you need to flatten your ribs because your ribs are flared because you have basically a breathing pattern issue. Okay. And so the amount of compensations built into this running practice is because you didn't think first order. So just please don't be there. You can do whatever you like. I'm trying to sort of create a sense of what is it safe to think about? Where can I put my precious time and energy and resources into? What's first order thinking so that things downstream start to fall into place? Okay, so anyway, leave comments, leave questions. Again, this show was brought to you by me. I trust me to make things for me. I've been using Level Up movement flow ropes for, I don't know, I made my first one myself 4 or 5 years ago. Anyway, thank you. Any other questions? I'm not sure how much lag there is on this. So I'm going to kind of stop because this will be released as a podcast too, and it's not going to sound great if you're listening to a podcast and someone's waffling. So if you've got a question, you better hit it hard now. While we're waiting for a question, what else can I say? Yeah, there are sort of tests on sort of back and endurance and holding your back, like I don't know, holding a hyperextension for 2 minutes. So there are actually metrics and tests that you can do to evaluate core and specifically sort of target what part of your core. I'm going to tell you that people that move well, that can do sort of what we described here, will basically pass any core test without ever having a dead bug, without ever having done bird dogs, and without ever having held back extensions or planks. Okay, I promise you. A functional core is a functional core, and it will pass functional core tests without you directly working on those isolated problems. And if you can get yourself into that space, then you really do have a sense of empowerment and perspective. And if you want to add exercises or you want to do whatever it is that you want to do, you have a sense of perspective, and it's not out of desperation or out of lack or you doing something out of fear. And that's my wish for you, is to have a functional core. You'd be surprised at how functional it is. And then you can say, hey, I can add this or not. But when your core is dysfunctional, you don't really have agency. And then you think, shit, I have a weak core, and you're acting out of fear and you're desperate to sort of fix things up and do these things, it's just not it's just not great. Anyway. Okay, here we have a question. I recently had a bilateral inguinal hernia repair. I heard you mention something about being in passing. Does blow before you go help prevent excess abdominal pressure? Oh, yes. So Dominique Valentine, blow before you go, and exhaling and finding your pelvic floor is your jam. It is 100,000% where your headspace needs to be. Okay. Anyway, we're going to leave it off there. Thank you, Dominic. Good luck. Let us know how you get on with blow before you go. I'm going to say, okay, so when you want to take your pelvic floor on with a journey and bring it along with your life and your function, your running, it requires a remarkable level of patience and persistence. Okay, so it can take months of just patiently adding your pelvic floor to your lifts, adding your pelvic floor to your mobility, thinking about blowing before you're going, sort of learning to relax your pelvic floor, then engage your pelvic floor, learning to sort of bring it along with it. It can take a long, long time before this becomes like, let's say like me, I was helping people with back pain before I really, really started to understand hip and pelvic floor function. Very successfully, okay? But personally for me, it took a very, very long time of patient, persistent work. But then having said that, I never had a healthy functioning sense of breathing or pelvic floor or whatever for decades. And it takes, if you were like me until you only start figuring this shit out in your 4th or 5th decade, it's going to take, you need to keep working on it and be patient and persistent like a hunter-gatherer for quite a long time. Okay. So that's my final thought. It gets better and it gets better and it gets better, and it keeps, the ramifications of that betterness keeps rippling through your body. But you got to keep, this is not something that you're going to sort of crush in 2 weeks. Okay. You can feel significant improvements in 2 weeks, but you need to be mindful and keep on keeping on for a long time before it becomes reflexes, automative, and just part of who you are. Okay, so thank you. Leave comments, look after yourself. Remember, like yourself and subscribe to yourself, and definitely turn on your notifications, because you never know when the universe is trying to help you. And good luck, Dominic, with your bilateral inguinal hernia and your journey. Okay, and all of you, take care of each other, look after yourselves, and I'll see you next week, same time, same place.